I've had a parent who followed me home. He really had a question that he wanted to ask me, and I said, I just don't have time to talk about that today. Let's make an appointment. And an appointment was made. But then later that day, as I was driving home, I'm looking in my rear vision mirror and this dad was following me home.
From Mamma Mia, this is the No Filter podcast, and I'm Mia Freedman. Gabbie Stroud used to be a teacher, and she used to love being a teacher until she didn't. There were a bunch of different reasons that caused her to become beaten down and disillusioned by the career that she used to adore. And none of those reasons were the kids she taught. The kids were actually the best part. But Gabbie quit teaching and she became a cleaner for a while to pay the bills. And she wrote a book in her spare time. And that book became a smash hit, unexpected bestseller in 2018. And it is still selling its socks off. Teachers who gobbled it up were like, thank you, this is my story too. And parents like me who read it were like, oh my God, we had no idea what teachers had to deal with behind the scenes. And now, after her first book called Teacher, she's written another brilliant and funny book about teaching, except this time it's not about teachers or even students. It's about parents. Gabbie's new book, Dear Parents, is a cracker for anyone who has ever been a school parent or who plans to be one someday. And yet again, teachers are saying, thank you, Gabbie, for telling our truth. It's not entirely comfortable reading for parents, I will admit, but oh my goodness, I laughed way more than I cringed because I recognised myself in this book, and I also recognised other parents that I've observed, just like Gabbie has, over the years in the schoolyard and at the school gate. This is the second time I've interviewed Gabbie Stroud, and our first conversation, I reckon it's one of my all-time favourite episodes of No Filter. I often mention it when people ask me what my favourite interviews were. We'll pop a link in the show notes if you want to go back and listen or re-listen later. But today, I'm thrilled to say Gabbie Stroud is back in the studio. Here's Gabbie. I have really mixed feelings about this book and about your life as an author because reading your two books and loving them as deeply and desperately as I have, I feel really, really sad that you're not teaching anymore. However, I feel really, really grateful and lucky, certainly as a parent, that you are spreading the word about a whole bunch of things that we need to know about teaching. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to sort of go through some of the things. You write this book in. Can you explain the sort of the idea behind the structure of the book? Because it's really interesting in the way you've written it.
Yeah. So this is the story of a teacher quite similar to myself. She's a teacher gone rogue. And so what happens is that she sits down late one evening to write her welcome to the school year letter for all the parents, and it's late, she's tired, she may have had a glass of wine before she sat down to write said letter. And as she's typing, she includes all the snide asides, as Kath and Kim would say, all those cynical thoughts that go through a teacher's mind as they're preparing for the school year, all those things that make a teacher roll their eyes and think, oh, this again. And by some freak accident, she hits send, and that letter goes out unvetted, uncensored by the principal, and it reaches all the parents. And what we have to do then as we read the book is suspend our sense of reality, because what happens is that the parents reply in ways that cause her to feel encouraged and that she should continue writing these candid and honest letters to the parents. In fact, what ends up happening is this very honest, open discourse opens up between the teacher and the parents. Fun, sort of rollicking read for that reason as well.
It's so funny and heartbreaking, which is... it reminds me actually of two books that I loved. One is Bridget Jones's Diary and the other is I Don't Know How She Does It. And they were both written in kind of diary form. So this is part What I Wish You Knew and part diary, the unspoken thoughts of a teacher. And it's a real public service because it's like, oh, I had no idea. Talk about insight. So I want to go through some of the areas that some of the things that you want parents to know, right? Mm-hmm. So I've been a school-age parent for about 15 years. My youngest is in year 6 this year and my eldest is at uni and in the workforce. So the first thing I wanted to ask you about, what do parents need to know about this idea of 24/7 availability by teachers?
What would be wonderful is if parents could understand that teachers need time to fill their cup, that teachers are often parents too, or if they're not a parent, they're part of a family, they're part of a relationship, they have a household to manage. And so teachers need that downtime to restore, regenerate, and just have a break.
But what about school holidays, Gabbie?
Oh, yes.
They're so long. We're recording this the second week back at school, and, many of us parents would think, you've had 2 months off. You've had 6 weeks or 2 months. You must be incredibly relaxed. I wish I was that lucky.
And do you know what? Sometimes after just one day at school, you're just like, I need another 6 weeks holiday. That's how draining it can feel. Yes, you're right. Holidays are a great opportunity for teachers to fill their cup. However, those holidays just aren't enough, because those demands and those emotional pressures that you feel as a teacher hit you on a Wednesday, right in the middle of the day, and, you've only got Wednesday night to recover from that and then get back on the horse and ride it again on the Thursday. Those holidays too, it's actually just professional stand-down time. So teachers spend a great deal of their holiday time preparing lessons, writing what we call programs, which are these massive units of work. For primary school teachers, that's across around 7 different subjects. So you have to plan out all those lessons, all that content that you're going to cover for maths and for English and for history and for geography and for the arts and for PE and for health, and on and on and on it goes. That all has to be prepped and planned. And then in the holidays, you have to go back and look back at that program and write all your evaluations and tick off all your registrations. There is an endless amount of preparation and reflective evaluation that has to happen just around those programs. On top of that, teachers are spending their holidays, prepping their classroom, cleaning their classroom, putting up displays, painting bookshelves, the kind of cleaning that happens that's paid within schools. It's, sort of vacuum the floors and, it's very minimal. And so teachers spend a lot of time on that classroom environment, making it a beautiful place for learners to come into. So back to that idea of 24/7 availability, when you're then, sitting down to eat a meal with your own family and in comes a ping message from a parent, wanting to, just a real quick question about this thing for tomorrow. And for teachers, that's just, it feels monumental. It just feels like, no, please, this has got to be my time now. We need that time just to fill our own cup and to restore and to recover from the working day so that we can go back and give it all again the next day. So it would just be really wonderful if parents could just step into that a little bit more, just to be a little bit more respectful of the teacher as a professional, and that they would much prefer to work within sort of normal working hours, that they will reply to emails in a timely fashion when they can. And I think just to remember too that your one quick question multiplied by 30 or 31 quick questions very quickly adds up to, an hour of work.
Can you think of some examples that you've heard of or experienced about this expectation of availability that parents have for teachers?
Oh, I've had a parent who followed me home. So
It's a bit stalky.
It was a little bit stalky, but he really had a question that he wanted to ask me, and I said, I just don't have time to talk about that today. Let's make an appointment. And an appointment was made, but then later that day as I was driving home, I'm looking in my rear vision mirror and this dad was following me home. And I got, what I would teach my kindergarten children were the early warning signs. This might not be safe for me. So I pulled in at a supermarket and he just hopped out next to me and said, oh, look, I just didn't think this could wait. And then he went on to ask the question. And so, look, that was kind of next level stuff, but it does happen. And, then that really, the sad thing about that is then it damages the relationship that you go on to have with other parents, because as a teacher, your wariness just increases then. You do get a feeling of, oh, I'm not safe. This job and the people who are also invested in this job, i.e. parents, they could, I don't know, they're really encroaching on areas of my life that aren't related to the job. You know, they're kind of encroaching on my family time. They're encroaching on my personal time. They're encroaching on the time I need for that reflective practice.
Is there an expectation among some parents that the teachers work for them?
Yes, very much so. Yeah, and teaching for me has always been a profession of service. But in my mind, I serve the student. I serve that child. I see that little vulnerable person there and I want to make them feel secure and empowered in the world. Parents seem to feel, particularly these days, it's a culture that's increased in recent years, as though they're the consumer and they will come in and make their requests/demands of the teacher. And again, that's a really damaging impact on the relationship between teachers and parents, because teachers don't see themselves as being there to serve the parent. Teachers see themselves as being there to serve the student.
Is it different in private schools to public schools, the lives of teachers?
It's difficult to say because all contexts can be very different, but I do think that when people are forking out quite substantial fees, that expectation of you work for me really, really increases, and the demands associated with that increase as well.
One thing that I've heard private school parents talk about is that they pay for access. They pay for access to the teacher, to the principal, you know, and that's that sense of entitlement, isn't it, that can become quite oppressive for teachers.
It can, and as soon as I hear that, I just think, gee, that's dangerous, isn't it? You know, because if you're entitled to that, then you have a sense of control. And what a dangerous world it is when people who aren't a qualified teacher and who don't have experience in education are pulling the strings of the puppets. You know, that's really troubling to me, and that is a mentality that we need to change. And I do believe one of the discoveries I made as I was writing this book is that we need to change the mentality, change the way we're thinking as a society about education and learning and why we send our kids to school. We really need to start asking those questions about what is learning all about, why do we learn, what do we want our children to gain from this experience of school.
You mentioned email and parents emailing. That's a fairly new development over the last few years, and sometimes students can email their teachers as well. How has technology impacted both positively and negatively the lives of teachers, and what should parents know about that?
Well, something that I see that has happened is technology's really changed the landscape of communication, the way teachers and parents are communicating with one another. Where we would once be able to just have a quick conversation in the playground at drop-off or pick-up, that's now become sort of look, could you get online and make an appointment? Or we've sent something home about that on the app, or please put that in writing, send it to me as an email.
So that's helpful.
Yeah, sometimes I feel, even as a teacher, sometimes I feel it's both helpful and not helpful, because we're trying to create a constant, perpetual paper trail just in case whatever this issue is comes back to bite us. We need to have a record of it, when in reality it could have been a conversation that we could have resolved there and then on the playground with the student there. You know, we could have talked about what went on at lunchtime that was an issue and possibly just nipped it in the bud. There's a funny kind of climate that's around school communication these days as well, where we have access to all these apps, and the apps are a means of the school communicating to the parents. Now, as a parent myself, that app seems to ping perpetually throughout the day with each little reminder, you know, like there was a head lice reminder the other day, quickly followed by, you know, we're having our welcome to school assembly, quickly followed by, you know, yet another message and yet another message. And as a parent, I was like, oh, enough already. You know, this is over communication, and it kept pinging on my phone. It was really intriguing though for my daughter Olivia. When she came home from school, she wanted to go through and see like, oh, look at all these messages you had today, and there was some pictures put up of the first day of school, and I could see her almost having like the Facebook effect. She was able to sort of scroll through. It was like social media of her school life. And
who's pushing for that though, that constant feed of communication? Is it the school that wants to do that? Is it the parents that are demanding?
I feel like we're sort of in experimental mode. So it's almost as though we still have, school newsletters and weekly communications, but, it's sometimes now it feels like this is so pressing, we must get this information out, bing, right now. And I wonder too if that's just a society's expectation these days. We need to get information out fast and quickly and constantly and all the time. Maybe it also speaks to that idea of parents wanting to know, why wasn't I told this? And, as though it seems too long to wait 1 week between newsletters for information.
1 week seems a long time now, doesn't it?
It does. It seems
Relatively.
a really long time. Yeah, and I can still remember when I, as a teacher, would hand the newsletter out. I think it might have been on a Monday, and it was in a hard copy, and I imagined parents popping it on the fridge, and there it was for reference. And yeah, that's just long gone now.
But in actual fact, not a lot happens in a school that needs to be communicated more often than once a week. Certainly not multiple times a day.
Yeah, that's right.
I was horrified when one of my kids went on a camp a few years ago, and there was some program that the school had signed up to where we got constant images and updates like throughout the day. Like, here's where they are, here are photos of them, here's what they're doing now. And I don't know, maybe some parents loved that and sought that out. But I found I just wanted him to go off and just be able to have a life and have an experience, and then for him to be able to come back and go, guess what happened, instead of me going, hey, I saw this and I saw that, and it's like I was there with him.
Yeah.
But I don't know if that's necessarily a positive thing.
Yeah. Isn't it interesting? I wonder about that too. And I do think that there are parents out there who do want to have that almost kind of constant surveillance of their child and how are things going, and I hope they're tracking well and I hope they're having a good day. But I do agree with you, Mia. I think that we need to give kids space. And we need to trust that when they go out into that space, when they go on that school camp, when we send them off for a day of school independent of us, we need to trust that we gave them wings, that they got this, that they can do it. Sometimes this sort of surveillance that we want to have over our kids speaks to an idea of maybe we're sending them out and they're not equipped to deal with the life that is in front of them. And that's a little bit troubling. And I don't think we need to then look more closely at our kids. We need to look at ourselves and ask ourselves, well, what are we doing and how can we help to empower our child so that they can face the world?
You talk a little bit, or you talk a lot in the book about the blurred boundaries between teachers and parents in terms of expectations. So it's kids and parents who confuse teachers with parents and the role of a teacher being having to parent. And you give some wonderful examples of these expectations that teachers will just teach your child to do basic things. Can you talk about what some of those things are?
Oh my gosh, how long have we got? Strap in.
As long as you like.
Oh, look, I've had to teach children how to blow their nose, how to remove a jumper, just successfully remove their own jumper.
At what age?
Oh, well, these were little kindy kids, but it would be great if little kindy kids came to school able to remove their own jumper. Of course, they still get stuck and it's hilarious and I enjoy those little moments and, we navigate it together. You don't expect them to come completely skilled up, but it would be great if they'd been helped along to learn these things, because a lot of times what happens is the parents are just doing it for them, and we're missing a whole heap of teachable little moments as parents where we could just step in and say, hey, I reckon you've got this from now on. Let me show you how to do it one more time. Now you do it. That's all I do as a teacher. It's, there's really no rocket science to teaching some of these basic life skills. But look, other things, even with bigger kids in year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, about how to pack your things in your school bag, and put them away. And yeah, look, arguably, sometimes this is just laziness, but sometimes also it's these just basic skills that they haven't learnt, like section all your books together, slide them in, pens and pencils, they could all easily fit in this pocket of your bag, and for some kids, when you spend time doing that with them, it's like a revelation, and they'll say to you, no one's ever taught me how to do that before. And I think as parents, it would be great to just step into that role a little more, take those moments to sort of say, hey, hang on, let me show you how to do this properly and demonstrate it and just say a couple of words around it and then it's job done. Kids they want to do well in the world. Kids are clever little people. They want to have success and they don't love fumbling their way through the world. So when we give them these opportunities and teach them these small life skills, that's a really wonderful thing. Something else, though, that as a teacher I was finding I was spending a lot of time teaching and I really felt it was something that should have been learnt at home was sort of ideas around resilience and failure and managing expectations around that. For some kids, school is the first time that they've been told, hey, this work actually isn't good enough and I think you can do better. And for some kids, they're just gutted, and they don't know how to come back from that. They just take it as on board as something so personal and as though they've failed, and it can really inhibit their ability to learn. School shouldn't be the first time they've heard no. It shouldn't be the first time they've experienced failure. We want to grow our kids up, and so for them to grow up, they need to have experienced failure and setbacks. They need to have that sense of resilience so that they can go out into the world and take, healthy risks and chances and have a go at things, because otherwise they're going to need someone with them accompanying them through life.
I've noticed that my generation of parents are absolutely obsessed with self-esteem of our children. I'm not the first person to notice this. And somewhere along the way, parent went from being a noun to being a verb to parent. And we became convinced by someone, I don't even know who, that our child having high self-esteem was the most important thing to avoid everything from bullying to obesity to eating disorders to depression to suicide, everything. And I found that how it manifests in me as a parent, and I think I'm not the only one, I find myself doing things like saying to my kids, great waiting, good listening, that's terrific drinking, great sleeping in this morning, good getting dressed, great, hydrating.
Yes.
And I find that I am praising them for the most basic things. And then when they get into the workforce, I find as a boss, I'm screaming about the fact that this generation requires constant validation. And yet I can see that I am putting in that pipeline along with many other parents, I think, of my generation, this infernal need. And it comes, whether it's getting a participation award, it's like good running, good trying, good thinking.
Yep.
And what you're saying is that it's counterintuitive and that actually builds no resilience. It doesn't build self-esteem, because self-esteem is about no one lives in a world where they're constantly winning and everyone's telling them they're amazing. Disappointment is what builds resilience and learning how to manage it.
Yeah, absolutely. So much in that, Mia, and I'm so glad that you raised that and you explain it so well. And we really do. We're just celebrating the mundane, you know. And the thing about that, in my experience of working with many, many children over many years, is kids know when you were just giving them a platitude, when you were just celebrating something that wasn't really, anything to be celebrated.
I think we were taught that you should encourage positive behaviour by rewarding it instead of focusing on negative behaviour. I don't know, but it seems to have been completely morphed into this monster.
Yeah, the pendulum's it's swung way too far over to one side, hasn't it? And I think that I do agree that self-esteem in our children is incredibly important, but the thing we need to know is that it's self-esteem. It's not parent esteem. Parents can't impart that on you. I think, when we say to our kids, I'm so proud of you, that's our feeling. It's up to the child to feel pride in themselves.
Oh, nice.
We are putting that that feeling out there for them and saying, this is my feeling about what you've done. But it's up to the child to feel within themselves, that's work I can be proud of. And in my last few years of teaching, I completely stopped saying amazing and well done and great job, those endless platitudes and that meaningless feedback that I was giving to children. And I stopped putting stickers on work and things like that. Instead, I started having what I felt were little heart-to-heart conversations with the kids, So I wasn't giving all this great feedback constantly and throughout the day. At the end of a lesson, I might pull out one or two kids that had caught my eye. I'd bring them to my desk and I would say to them, I'm proud of this work. This is work you should feel proud of. Do you feel proud of it? And I'd point out specifically, and I'd go back through their book. Look back here when you first started. This is how you used to, write your words or write your sentences. Look at this now. Look at what you're doing. Can you see that growth? And just really pointing it out to them, taking that time to really dwell in what they had done. And honestly, Mia, you could see them grow inches, And yeah, it was me heaping a little bit of praise on them, but it was helping them recognise that it's important to track your own progress, to think about your own learning, to think about what it means when someone does give you some praise. And by the same token, when work wasn't great, I would call kids over and I'd say, hey, when I look back, I see you're capable of this. What's happened today? What's going on for you? And sort of having those conversations. We need our kids to be able to go out into the world years beyond their care in our home and know how to get their own self-esteem, know how to build their own self-esteem and build their own self-worth, because we just can't track with them and follow with them throughout the rest of their life. We've got to give them the skills now and empower them now.
In the book, you talk about the path of least resistance and you describe a parent-teacher conference where that plays out. Can you tell that story?
Yes. On this particular occasion, I'm sitting there and I've got a student in year 6 and her literacy levels were nowhere near where they needed to be. It was really concerning me, particularly as she was facing a transition to high school the next year. What I saw as being needed most desperately was more reading at home, more regular reading at home. And at this learning conference, I said to the mum, this is what's required, and the student knows this. I've spoken to her about this. We need to have more regular reading at home. And in this way, we could possibly play a little game of catch-up and maybe get these literacy skills improving. And the mum said to me, well, when my daughter gets home, she really likes to go to the skate park, and so that, so it's really hard to get that time to do that reading. And I said, okay, cool, I get it. Skate park, heaps of fun after a busy day at school. What I'd like is, and what I'd like to suggest is, when she gets home, could we just have 10 minutes of reading? And if Mum, you could sit there with her and make sure that it happens, and then off to the skate park. And the mum turns to the daughter and says, would you do that? And my teacher heart just sort of withered and, turned to dust in my chest, because I was just so frustrated by that request. Would you do that? Because as the parent, I really needed the mum to step into that role of supporting me as the classroom teacher, and not just supporting me, supporting her daughter, whose literacy skills really needed work. What I needed in that scenario was for the mum to say to her child, okay, this is what we're going to do. Ms. Stroud says this is a great idea. We're going to have a crack at this and we're going to start tonight or tomorrow or whatever. Instead, the mum turned and said, would you do that? And I think the child shrugged or sort of mumbled a response. And then the mum said to me, quite apologetically, I don't like upsetting her. And then the parent inside me kind of raged a little, and I wanted to say, that's your job. And I don't mean that in a nasty way. I don't want parents out there just randomly upsetting their children, but that is our role as a parent, to encourage our kids to experience things that might make them feel uncomfortable, to support them in doing some extra work that's going to help them make progress later in their learning. It's our job to say no to our kids. It's our job to have fights with them, and not necessarily fights where we win, but fights where we try to understand each other. This is what parenting is. It gets ugly and messy and it's complicated, and you're going to have all kinds of feelings, but we need to go there on behalf of our kids kids. We need to get in there and do that work so that we grow them up, so that we give them wings, so that we build their self-esteem, so that we empower them. You know, this kid sitting there, I was just thinking, what happens in your house? Is this child running the show? You know, what are we serving for dinner tonight?
And that doesn't make kids feel safe, actually.
No, kids need boundaries.
It's a false economy of a parent who doesn't want confrontation.
Absolutely. And those kids, you can see how they present in the classroom. You see that they'll often butt heads with you because they think they've got to run the show, or you see them just completely like wither down and fly under the radar because they think, oh, thank goodness the teacher's got this and I don't have to be on like I am at home.
What you just mentioned really speaks to the parents eroding authority, you know, as a parent. And simultaneously, we've really seen an eroding authority of the teacher in the school, because I'll break one of the things that you want parents to stop doing in your book, which is stop saying, when I was at school, and you say that nostalgia is actually really unhelpful. But when I was at school, Gabbie, and probably when you were at school, it would never in a million years would my parents take my side over the school. If I got in trouble, if I got a detention, if anything happened, if I was in trouble for a uniform thing, whatever, my parents would never come to the school and complain and run interference on my behalf. And yet that's changed a lot, hasn't it?
Yeah. And look, when I was at school, that's what it was. Trouble at school meant I was in trouble at home. And I remember one time getting quite unjustly punished for wearing the incorrect uniform on the incorrect day. I was still in the uniform. I just wore sports uniform on the wrong day, and I got a detention. Went home to mum and dad expecting that they would come in and advocate on my behalf. And my mum and dad just said, well, that's a bit unlucky for you, so you'll just have to do the detention. And, you know, their attitude was stuff like that happens in life.
Sometimes things feel unfair.
Yeah.
Sometimes things are unfair.
Yeah, that's right. You know, and you just have to go, serve your time, and let's try to get the uniform right from now on. And, you know, I went and I did it, and I grumbled a bit about it, but, you know, I learned from that life is unfair and things don't always go my way, but I'll be okay. I'll be okay.
So it's really misguided, this belief that to be good parents, it means protecting our child from every injustice or negative emotion in the world as it pertains to school.
Yeah, I think and look, also, it's just exhausting as a parent to have to go in and always be advocating for your child and running interference for them and advocating for them. There is a place where we need to advocate for our children, and I would always say to parents, because parents would sometimes come in and be quite apologetic. I'm sorry I'm taking up your time. I'm sorry I've come in. But I would say to them, no, this is, you know, if it's concerning for you, then I should know about it. And so I don't want to shut down completely that idea of communication between parents and teachers. But what I'd like to have parents think about is, am I doing this because my child can't do this for themselves? Or am I just doing this because I just feel the need to protect my child and advocate for my child and make things better for my child? And I don't think that, I don't think that the teacher is aware of this. You know, is it an anxious kind of parenting request, or is it something that's genuine and authentic and it really does require the parent to come in?
I remember when my son started high school and we had, one of those information nights, and one of the teachers said, at some stage during your son's time in high school, he's going to get in trouble. Mm. And the thing is, it will never be his fault. And I remember every time any of my kids get in trouble, it's always like, this thing happened, I got to teach, but it was not my fault.
Yes.
And so I always go into, maybe this makes me a bad parent, but I always go into everything assuming that it is their fault. If they got in trouble and they've got a detention, it's probably their fault.
It could well be.
Like, more likely than not, I'm going to give the teacher the benefit of the doubt.
Yeah.
Because, of course, the kid's going to go, it wasn't my fault.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
In your first book and in this one, you write so movingly and impactfully about kids who are difficult, different. There's a lot of different ways to describe them, but in this book, it manifests in a child that you call Reaxton. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what parents need to know about the Reaxtons of their kids' class or their kids' year? Because all of my kids have come home with a story about a particular kid or a couple of different kids who have behaved in really inappropriate ways, sometimes violent ways. And what is it? And of course, as a parent, you're like, oh, this is not good enough and this must change and how can this happen? But what do teachers want parents to know about these kids?
What needs to be understood about the work that teachers do is that we teach, we bring together and we create a community from a cross-section of society. We have all these children walk through our classroom doors each day and they've all come from a very different household, each and every one of them. And some of them have come from households that are dramatically different from our own. Some of them have not felt safe since they last left our classroom. And they bring their response to that into this safe place of the classroom. The reactants of the world are these troubled, damaged children who have experienced things that no one should experience, let alone a child. And as a teacher, I see it as my role not just to teach the good kids, the compliant kids, the kids that have come from these lovely normalised homes, but it's also my responsibility and my calling to teach those kids that are damaged and troubled. And one of the best ways that I can teach them, and this might sound really alarming to people listening, but is to have them in an environment where they are around other kids who have healthy, happy homes. You know, it gives them an opportunity to look around the world that is their world, the school world, and go, hey, there are other ways of being. And this is something new that sort of happened in education, is this integration of kids either troubled or damaged or even children with additional needs, and bringing them into mainstream classrooms. It's difficult. It is a lot of work. It is very hard. It's emotionally taxing, and for parents on the outside looking in, it can look really frightening for their little child who they're so invested in. They're worried that that child is going to act out in a way that hurts their child, and occasionally that does happen.
Or is even being disruptive and taking valuable learning time away from my precious child.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do we need to know about how we view those kids?
Well, we need to...
before we complain about them.
Well, my thing is always we need to have compassion, and we also need to stop trying to just weed them out, because what teachers are trying to do are break cycles. We're trying to break cycles of poverty and inequality, and we do that by bringing those kids into our classrooms and putting them into our society and valuing them and helping them find more normal and healthy pathways to success. The other thing that we need to understand about these troubled children that may have experienced trauma or may live in unsafe situations is that the system that's meant to support them, the welfare system that we have, doesn't support them in the ways that it needs to support them, particularly in school environments. They get brought into our schools, and these teachers who are just, teachers are standing up the front trying to teach them and integrate them and bring them in. What we need and what parents need to understand is we need better systems around those children. The welfare system is as stretched as the education system is. And so we need to start thinking about ways that we can better support teachers and the agencies that support those children, so that when they come into the classrooms, we're not robbing people of valuable, or robbing all our other students of valuable learning time. Our schools need to be resourced and funded in such a way that those kids have the support they need. Some of these kids need another adult with them. So they've got their classroom teacher up the front, but they need another adult with them all the time so that they can gradually be integrated into, a mainstream classroom. So the responsibility there that I would ask parents to think about is, when you vote, look at and think about what's the education policy, where's the welfare of children in this policy that's being put forward. We're just going to continually see these troubled kids coming into our classrooms, creating havoc, stressing teachers, stressing parents, interrupting learning time. It's going to continue on and on and on until we start making big systemic changes to our education system and the welfare system that supports those children. And I'm really quite passionate about that because I've seen so many troubled kids. And recently, a child who was very much an inspiration of this character, Reaxton, he finished his schooling career and he finished school and then took his own life. It was as though he just couldn't even see where he would fit in the world beyond school. And I just think we can do better. This is Australia. We can do better.
Speaking of doing better, Gabbie, I've sent my kids to school with nits and coughs and colds and dosed them up on Panadol and Nurofen to get them out the door.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I am sorry. The teacher in your book ends up in hospital.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
What do you want parents to know about sick kids?
If your kid's sick, please don't send them into school. Please don't. Please. I know, look, I'm a parent and I get it, and I know it is so, so hard arranging alternate care for your child when they are unwell. And look, I've done it too. I've sent kids, my own girls, off to school. They've sort of been half whingy of a morning. You have a Panadol, you'll be right.
They used to call it the Denizen dump for daycare.
Yeah.
Load them up.
Yep.
Shoot them out the door. At least you'll get a few hours before the daycare centre calls and goes,
Yeah. And look, the thing with that is your classroom just becomes a festering incubation cubicle of all things disgusting, and it's just no one's learning, everyone's coughing, the teacher ends up getting sick, then you have a relief teacher, so much is lost, so much productivity is lost. I remember teaching kindergarten this one year, and this little guy, he kept getting tonsillitis and giving it to me. We handed it back and forth to one another throughout an entire winter, and eventually he had his tonsils removed, and I was so grateful.
What do you want parents to know about the best bits? The best bits of teaching that we might not know about?
The best bits of teaching. Teaching, I would turn up, even on my worst day when I didn't want to go into the classroom and I felt I was too exhausted, I would turn up because I knew every single day something funny would happen. And I just wanted to see what the funny thing would be.
What are some of those funny things?
Oh, it's just little things. I love the way kids make a play on words, and not necessarily deliberately, so just because they don't understand, So one of my favourite little anecdotes is a little guy called Bryce, and one afternoon he said, "Gee, those avocados are loud," and it was the cicadas outside in the hot summer sun. I just love that, those avocados. So I would always turn up just to see what kind of fun thing was going to be said that day. Just the other day, Olivia came home from school and told me about how her apple dropped out of her hand and it rolled down the stairs and across the playground and down the next hill, and it just kept rolling and rolling and rolling. And the teacher stood there and laughed and laughed, and I thought, that's just wonderful. That's one of the best bits of teaching, is that you're there with kids and funny stuff just happens, and kids are just so funny. I describe in the book one example where some boys are arguing over who a school jumper belongs to, and to try and determine who it belongs to, they're all sniffing it. They're all smelling it because they think from that they'll be able to determine who owns this jumper. You can't write comedy like this. Kids are just so hilarious. I love too the magic moment. I love that moment where children learn something and they learnt it because I taught them, and they look at me and their little eyes are shining, and sometimes they say it and sometimes it's just written on their face, but the question is, did you see me do that? Oh, I love that. I just love that moment. It's like a drug for teachers. We keep going back again and again just for that magic moment, that sense of achievement that you see on a child's face. It's the goods, Mia. It's
the way
so
your face
lovely.
just lights up when you talk about that, Gabbie, is beautiful.
It's so special.
Thank you to all the teachers. Thank you for writing this book. Parents, you've got to read this book. You will never behave in the same way in and around your school again. It's called Dear Parents. It's out now, Gabbie. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
God, I love that woman. And if you're a teacher, I hope you feel seen, heard and understood after hearing Gabbie and reading her books. And if you're a parent, I hope you've picked up a few tips and certainly gained some empathy. I've certainly had my eyes open to how tough teaching can be and what a punish parents can be sometimes. And I'm sorry about all those times I've sent my kids to school sick. I won't do it anymore. No Filter is produced by Melanie Tait, and if you are wanting to get some more parenting podcasts in your ears, we have a bunch of them here at Mamma Mia. We have This Glorious Mess, which comes out twice a week. We have Little Kids in the beginning of the week and Big Kids towards the end of the week. We've got Hello Bump, which is a podcast about pregnancy. We've got Before the Bump, which is about fertility. And we've also got Get Me Pregnant, which is about assisted fertility. And we've got another podcast called Year One for everything that you need to know in that first year. So check out some of our other parenting podcasts. For all our podcasts, we've got about 35 of them now. Go to mamamia.com/podcasts and I'll pop into your ears next week.